Hello, I'm Mary Rasenberger. I'm CEO of the Authors Guild, and I want to thank you all for joining us this evening to celebrate and launch Banned Book Week this year with our panel, When Your Book is Banned. The Authors Guild, for those of you who don't know us, is the nation's oldest and largest professional organization of writers with over 12,000 members. Its mission is to educate, protect, and support American authors to ensure that we have a robust, diverse literary culture in the United States. And free speech is naturally one of our top priorities. This year, Banned Books Week brings increased focus and importance as we face an onslaught of book bans across the country. Books that address sexual or gender identity or race, or that just have BIPOC characters or queer characters are being removed from schools and libraries and even criminalized. According to Penn's recent study, which was just released today, these book restrictions have taken place in 138 school districts, which includes 5,000 individual schools and covers 4 million students. It's massive. Sadly, this book banning is being used as a political tool, with far-right national organizations sending playbooks into local communities, scaring them about certain books and inciting them to ban books. Sometimes the books aren't even in the local schools and libraries, and they've got some of the parents riled up. And the result is that librarians and teachers are being harassed, called pornographers, pedophiles, and even subject to criminal liability now in, I think, 15 states for teaching or providing certain books. And these are almost all, I think, all books that might be and are incredibly helpful to a lot of students. If you're gay, if you're Black, especially if you're in an intolerant community, seeing someone like you in a book could be a lifesaver. So these bans are incredibly undemocratic because it's a minority of people. It's a minority that are imposing their beliefs about what kids should read on their families. And teachers and librarians fear losing their jobs or being sent to jail for violating ill-defined rules of law or laws, and authors fear not getting published or being sold. But it's the students who are losing out most of all by being restricted from what they can read. And that's one of the reasons the Authors Guild launched our Banned Books Club on Fable, the Fable platform, and where we have authors, including a couple of the authors we have here tonight, actually helping to moderate the book club about their book. So I think all of us agree that this book banning needs to stop. It's one thing to have discussions in a school system, in a school, about what books are appropriate at what age, but what's happening now is not that. It's dangerous territory. No book should ever be banned for political reasons, whether from the left or the right. And it's one of the founding principles of our democracy. So we are very fortunate to have with us tonight 3 amazing authors who've all experienced having their books banned, and indeed are almost always at the top of the banned books list. So let me introduce them. First, we have Sherman Alexie. He's a poet, short story writer, novelist, essayist, memoirist, and filmmaker. He's published 24 books, including Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, which won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature and was listed by the American Library Association as the most banned and challenged book from 2010 to 2019. He's also won the Penn Faulkner and Penn Malamud Awards. He lives with his family in Seattle. Next, Jonathan Evison is the award-winning author of 7 novels, All About Lulu, West of Here, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, and Lawn Boy, which is one of the most banned books these days, and most recently, Small World. He lives with his family in Western Washington. Ellen Hopkins is the award-winning author of 4 novels for adult readers, 2 middle grade novels, and 14 New York Times best-selling young adult novels in verse, all of which have been targeted by the recent book banning hysteria. She lives near Carson City, Nevada, with her extended family, 2 German Shepherds, and 2 ponds of koi. Later tonight is the Authors Guild General Counsel, Cheryl Davis, and I'm going to let her take it away. Thanks to our panelists tonight.
Thanks,
And
Mary.
thank you, Mary, for that lovely introduction. I am going to start us off by setting the conversation a bit into context, and I'd like to ask you all to tell us a bit about your books that have been banned, the books that have been banned, and why they've been banned. I actually want to start this with Sherman, not just because of alphabetical order, but because you have a wonderful blurb quote from Neil Gaiman about your book, and I think I'm reading it correctly, saying, "I have no doubt that in a year or so, it'll both be winning awards and being banned."
Yeah, Neil called that one correctly, except I think it took about 3.5 days for the first ban to come down. My book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, is the story of a Spokane Indian boy, Arnold Sperrit Jr., who leaves the reservation school for the farm town school on the border, white Christian conservative community, and finds love, friendship, acceptance, and tolerance in that community. And it's a search for self-identity, and it's been banned for profanity, it's been banned for blasphemy, it's been banned for violence, it's been banned for inappropriate sexuality, it's been banned for jokes about masturbation, it's been banned for all sorts of reasons, and those are just some of them.
Thanks, Sherman. Jonathan, again, to go in alphabetical order.
Like Sherman's, mine is just a journey of a young protagonist trying to find his way and trying to get his little piece of the American dream in a culture where he's not really provided equal say or equal opportunities. And he's a landscaper raised by a single mom with a special needs adult brother, and he's an autodidact. And I think it's ironic that the book was banned, because there's part in the book where Mike is like, "Where's the books about me?" Because he grows up in the library, like I did when my mom was working her second job. I'd be at the library after school, and he's in there wondering, where are the books about me? And that's exactly what a whole generation of readers are going to be asking themselves if these people have their way. Banned, I think, I don't really know why. I mean, there's literally no graphic sex in my book. There's sexual references that are purposefully presented in sort of coarse language because of the context. Like in one case, my protagonist is coming out to his homophobic best friend, and he says, "Look, I sucked another guy's cock." You know what I mean? And so it's the language is coarse, but it's in no way graphic. There's no, there's nothing in my book that isn't in any Judd Apatow film. I think what they don't like about it is that it's just about marginalized people trying to have a voice and trying to get some equal representation, and they'd rather keep those people on the margins.
And this is Lawn Boy, correct?
Yeah. No, that's right. I should mention the title. Not to be confused with poor Gary Paulsen, who the last 2 weeks of his life, like me, spent getting misdirected emails calling him a pedophile, because he wrote a middle grader's book about a kid who mows lawns in the summers. And he actually died last fall, right when all that was going on. I felt horrible.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Ellen, take it away.
Well, since it's not a single book of mine, it's like all 14 of my YAs in different school districts, depending on who came across my name on what book cover. Basically, that's kind of, at this point, it's just my name that's getting my books banned. I think I don't even think they have any clue what's inside them, other than there's probably a cuss word, there's probably an LGBTQ character. I mean, there are LGBTQ characters in all my books. They're not all protagonists, but they are all represent. All my books represent that community for sure. There is no graphic sex, but there are sexual references for sure. Because hey, you know what? The thing about teenagers, if they're not actually having sex, they're thinking about sex. You know what I mean? Because adolescence kind of does that to you. You know what? So I try to write where kids live. I've raised 3 generations of kids all the way through. I've got one 14-year-old left here with us. So I've been raising kids for a long time. I know how they think. I know how they talk. I know what their friends are talking about. I know what they watch on TV. I know what's in their video games. So I try to write where they live. I write as honestly as I can about it because I respect that generation. I respect the issues that they face every single day. So this idea that, if they don't read about something, they're not going to know about drugs. If they don't read about sex, they're not going to have sex. If they don't read about kids cussing, they're not going to cuss. By the way, I've done a lot of school visits. You will hear the F word in elementary school. So it's not just teens that are out there spouting the F word. And so again, I just try to write as honestly as I can. There are drug references because Tranquility is about addiction. It's pretty hard to write about addiction if you don't have a drug reference inside those books. So, and now, like I said, they're just banning basically me. They're not even banning just my books.
You got a good brand. I can only get one band. You've got like the whole wholesale. I keep waiting for the sales to go up on all my other books. It's not happening. There's just Envoy and then the rest of my catalog. So congratulations.
Yeah, I didn't even have to try. I bet those people really think I'm scary, and I am scary looking because I'm getting old, you know what I mean? But I'm not that scary looking.
What you said is really interesting about these people. I mean, we know my 4-year-old daughter says, "Fuck you." She puts up the wrong "spuck" with an S. She puts up the wrong fingers and she says, "Fuck you, Daddy." She's 4. I don't understand what these people think they're protecting anybody from. If it's not just giving marginalized people voices, what are they afraid of? I mean, whether or not they like it, their kids have got a gay friend or a non-binary friend or a Black friend or a Mexican friend, or, you know what I mean? It's like, I really don't understand it. I mean, I just don't get it.
Well, that's because that's another reason why they want to dismantle public school education. Let's just homeschool all our kids. Let's make sure they don't have those friends. Let's make sure they don't ever see those people. And it's like where do you people live? And also, don't you have more important things to do with your time?
Well, yeah, the same parents that are calling it out, I'm like, well, it's funny, I didn't see you at the PTO meeting. I'm volunteering at 3 classrooms because all my kids go to co-op and alternative schools. So I'm like teaching writing units and all 3. I'm in the classroom all the time. And a lot of these squeaky wheel parents or mama bears or whatever you're going to call them, I'm like, I got $50. It says that person's not part of the PTO. They don't do any, where are they in the classroom when they're invited,
Mhm.
Well, non-parents show up to the school board meetings. Community members show up in force this last year with that playbook in place to disrupt those meetings, to add a level of hostility and the threat inherent about people's jobs and to intimidate people. So it's not just parents who are doing it.
And that's what's really scary about it is that these people they're obviously a minority because 8 out of 10 people that you talk to on the street believe in free speech and don't want books banned, but they're very good at insinuating themselves on governance at every level. And they're very good at being squeaky wheels and bullying. And that's what's scary about it is they're outnumbered and they're still gaining traction.
Well, they're really the squeaky wheels that are getting the most grease. And actually, we have a question from one of our authors in the audience that says, I am the author of a nonfiction book for LGBTQ teens. My book is banned in I don't know how many districts. As an author, what kinds of actions can I take to help get the books into the hands of teens who need it? And I'd love to know your thoughts on suggestions on how they might be able to do that.
I would say get it banned. It's the only thing that works for me. It seems like it should already be working. I mean, that's the other part I don't get. They ban the book and the people just run out and buy it. If they're really trying to protect them, they should just, hush, hush, right?
Well, I think nonfiction books, especially, those are the even more important than fiction, for kids who need those books. And that's a good question. Depending on the community you're at, if you can show up at school board meetings, even maybe not even in your own community, just to say, this is why this book should be here. This is why I wrote the book to start with. Because a lot of times these people have it in our minds that we are writing books in order to mess kids up, you know what I mean? It's and we're doing the exact opposite. We're trying to help them develop a voice, get the information they need to know not only who they are, but who their friends are, you know, like where they want to go in life. And it's like, you can't, what I can say is you can't back down. You can't back away from those challenges. You need to, if you can, what I do, I have a file of like reader messages and emails and stuff telling me how much my books have helped them in whatever spaces. If you could develop a file of messages or reader emails that you can send off to school board meetings, or you can send off to a book challenge, I've found that's really been helpful.
Yeah, I did a lot of statements to school boards when students reached out to ask me to do it, saying things like that. And that's a great idea, because I can't count. And I know all of us as writers have had that experience where you get tons of letters from young readers that say your books were so important to me. I mean, people say that, like, you know, your work changed my life. I mean, it's like, and you want to take this away, you know?
Little Brown has been supportive of me over the years during this and has sent books to different places. In Boise, Idaho, a few years ago, students actually organized a book giveaway. Their high school had banned the book, but they went to a local public park and set up like a drive-through where people went through and got free books. And I've sent books to local libraries. If a book is banned in a school, then I've contacted the closest library and sent books to them, donated books to their shelves, so that the book is available to students in the library if it's not in the school. Of course, now they're attacking libraries. So it's hard to say, depending on where you're at, if the library can even accept those books or display them because of threats of legal action against them.
But there are some libraries that are making banned books available to people, readers in other communities. So you might want to look into that and see if you're a library where your book is available might be willing to make the book available through e-lending to another community. And
Brooklyn
also,
Public Library has that. So if
Yep.
you can go to the Brooklyn Public Library site, any kid in the country can apply for a library card from them and get the books.
Yeah, in fact, I just read this today. They gave away like 5,000 free, 5,161. The number's stuck in my head for some reason. I saw a headline.
And also there's what we did with our Fabled Banned Books Club. Perhaps you can get a similar sort of book club in your community, or in a community where you know that there are kids who need that book. Let them know that they can get together themselves to be able to read this book, perhaps through an e-lending or some other book club service. And what I wanted to also ask, just to keep the conversation flowing, is like, Sherman, you had that wonderful quote from Neil about your book potentially being banned, and that was some years ago. And Jonathan, you talk about how these people who are so adamant now aren't really involved in the PTO meetings. How is book banning, or the approach to challenging books, changed over time, and in your experience? What have you seen?
Well, when it started out, it was pretty isolated cases. There was no state or national organization or effort to ban books. It was school by school, and those were easy to address. And they weren't necessarily scary for me. That's one of the things I want to make clear, is that I'm not in those communities. I'm not a teacher or a librarian in those communities. So I'm not directly under siege. My book is, but it's other people defending it in those communities. And now with these nationwide and statewide efforts, it's really scary for local people. What I'm seeing is, it's really easy to intimidate a librarian in a small community. It's really easy to scare a public school teacher in a small community. It's even easy to scare a school board member in a small community. And I think that's what's happening. They're bullies. They're bullying teachers and librarians and school board members.
Yeah, and it used to be the same. It'd be like a single parent would, see their kid reading Frank or whatever and say, I don't know if I want you to read this. And so then, it would be one person coming at me. And it's easy to have a dialogue one-on-one with one parent, or, even a small group of parents. But when it's an organized effort like this, it's a lot more difficult, because they're not listening. They're not there to listen, by the way. They're there to get their way. They're not there to have a conversation or to even develop some kind of understanding of what's in those books, why those books are important. And as has already been mentioned, it's the kids who are in danger now. It's the kids who are not getting what they need. They're kids that don't have access, they can't buy books. So, and they don't have access maybe to public library. So if they can't find books, the books they need in their schools, that's a real danger. And those kids, when they come to me, they are so thankful. They are so, and you know, and I'm sure you guys get it too. It's not just they're thankful for the books. Your book saved my life. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, sometimes these kids are on the edge and they find a book and they find themselves in that book and they see that someone knows, someone understands they're there, someone cares that they're there, someone is listening to their problems. That is hugely important for kids who might not get that support otherwise. And that's
2 days ago, I got one from a girl who actually wrote the letter to Mike, my protagonist. You know, that's how she wrote the letter to me. Is she addressed Mike, thanking Mike, you know, and I thought that was kind of cool that, you know, Mike had talked to her like a friend and she wrote it back like a friend. Well, I'll tell you, these people can be nasty, man. I mean, the first couple of weeks, I got death threats. I was doxxed, you know, just as far as my social networks. Thankfully, nobody got my address, my physical address, but like all my social networks were under siege. I was waking up to messages calling me a pedophile every morning. People just graphically describing horrible sexual acts with my daughters and things like that felt like, yeah, you know what I mean? You project much, buddy. You're calling me a pedophile. And that calmed down after a few weeks, but like it was really unnerving for a few weeks because these people didn't need, all they needed was one little piece of disinformation to run with it, you know? I mean, this thing has been for me like up close a study in misinformation and how it works. Just how they, you know, one lady posts a TikTok video with her son holding a, you know, sign. She makes her poor high school son. She's reading a part of my book out of context, like a paragraph, and she's making her poor miserable son sit there with a paper plate that says pedophile, his spelling error, not mine. And she posts it on TikTok, and you can just see she's being unreasonable, and she's basically just filibustering this school board meeting in Leander, Texas, and everyone's like, lady, you know, order, and she's just, you know, she's not there, like you said, to talk to anybody. She posts a 2-minute TikTok video, and then the next day I'm under siege completely. I mean, you know, that's all it took, you know, and it didn't matter that USA Today or Washington Post or all the national media came out and like pretty much just said there is no pedophilia in this book. You know, they conveniently won't, you know, didn't read any of the retractions or anything. They've made up their mind what they want. And they're not, that's the problem, is you want to reason, but you can't really reason with them.
Well, and social media has only made it. I mean, it was like something that was so important to like jumpstarting our careers, and then now it's been weaponized. You know, so there's armies of trolls and bots and whatever that come out after you. I had one the other day too. It was like the guy was reading. He was reading, and it was, I'm sure it was sexually explicit because it came out of one of my adult novels. You know, Love Lies Beneath, and there's a kid's book called Lies Beneath. So they're two very separate books. One's a kid's book. Mine is definitely an adult book. And he's sitting there reading this passage out there. But fortunately, the school district, you know, finally looked at him and said, we have never carried that book in our school. You know, at least they were informed enough to know the difference.
But how do you combat the disinformation? How do you combat these challenges when you know they're wrong? Do you issue a statement? Does your publisher issue a statement?
Over the years, journalists have done me no favors when they reprint somebody's accusations without actually reading the book themselves. So over the years, a mythology is built around what's in the book. Nobody has sex in my book. There is no sex in my book, but over the years, the mythology has grown and been repeated in newspapers so that when somebody does a basic search on my book, they're going to find these journalists referencing book banners without investigating their claims. It's lazy journalism when it comes to book banning.
And
I've been pretty lucky. Everybody has researched it and they've printed retractions and they've been very supportive, but it doesn't matter. The people don't read them. They don't care. A
true journalist will come to this to the source and ask for at least a statement, you know what I mean? They're gonna, and a lot of the stuff, I mean, no one's ever come to ask me, you know, what my thought on it was. And there are lots and lots of articles out there, never got a comment from me, never got a statement from me. And again, I'm a former journalist, and that would be the first thing I would do, you know, in a situation like that.
That is stunning, Ellen. That's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to have authors come on here and express themselves, because you're extremely eloquent people. These ones would think they would be asking you to speak on your own behalf.
Well, maybe they don't want to hear the other side. Maybe it's, you know, it's more clicks if they don't get the other side.
It's
Yeah,
more
how's-
interesting to have the left and right yelling at each other over social media than asking authors what they think.
Right. I agree.
Now, have these challenges had any impact on any of your current projects or projects you were considering working on?
For me, yeah. For me, I mean, we talk a lot about soft censorship and self-censorship, and again, I just turned in a young adult novel a couple months ago, and I had to remind myself to write like I always have written, because, you know, I kept coming to, in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe I could just avoid some of this if I just didn't do that. But that's not me. Again, you know, that's not the kind of writer I am, and that's not the kind of author I want to be. And so to like self-censor, that to me that's wrong. And so I was like, don't do that. Don't do that. I'll go back in the revision and put it back in, you know, if I have to, whatever.
Well, when it comes to writing books, the pre-publication of books, I think here is where the left comes in with their modes of censorship. Sensitivity readers, where publishers hand all this power to one person over an author's book. That one person can sabotage one reader, one sensitivity reader can sabotage an author's book before it's even published, before there are even a second draft of the book. So there is a soft censorship in that way from the left. And my book has been banned by the left in places too, for some of the same reasons: profanity and blasphemy. And so while the right is more organized and scares me more on a national level, I get scared inside the business for other authors. I have a big career. I can do what I want. But what is somebody who has the first book going to do when the publisher demands changes they may not agree with?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as somebody, look, I'm a fat middle-aged white guy, you know, so I'm just glad to be at the table here about, in a lot of ways, in terms of when we're talking about marginalized people. And I've always written about marginalized people, and these are the, you know, and so I feel pressure at times to kind of stay in my lane and things like that, but it's not in my nature. If I'm writing about the American experiment, which I invariably am with all my books, I put diversity front and center, because pluralism is like the greatest American ideal, the only good one left. And so I to Sherman's point, I do feel a little pressure from the left at times. And when I write outside my purview of my personal experience, as a rule, I've always had my own readers for that. You know, I didn't think of them as sensitivity readers. I thought of them as truth readers, because as authors, we know one false note and we leave the reader. So if I'm writing a Black character, if I'm writing, you know, a character, an 80-year-old female character, I'm going to find somebody in my life. If I'm writing a combat veteran, I'm blessed with a lot of friends and a huge network. So I'm going to find somebody that has had that experience or close to that experience to help me just get it right. You know what I mean? It's not about offending people for me. It's about getting it right, because I want to write truth. I want to write books that hit home. You know what I mean? So even the name sensitivity reader just kind of makes me cringe, because like Sherman said, they have a lot of power. One person can make or break your book. And, you know, I mean, that person doesn't necessarily have a experience that's really much closer to what they're reading than you do in certain cases, I feel like.
Well, if we can only write ourselves, I mean, it'd be pretty boring to write me all the time, you know. I'm not that interested in person, you know. And plus I am writing for teens, and I'm not obviously a teen anymore. So if you can only write yourself, that's bad. But also I've seen experiences over the last couple of years when kind of own voice has kind of pushed its way in, where an author was actually forced to come out, and she'd been in the closet as far as her like gender identity for a long, long time, and she was forced to come out publicly and state that yes, that this is who I am. And so, I mean, that to me is like, you should never have to face something like that as an author. You know, you should be able to write, as long as the characters ring true, then, and they are true, then you should be able to write whatever characters you want. And
I feel like that's what the court of public opinion is for. I mean, if I do a bad job of it, rake me over the coals, but that shouldn't start at the publication. You know, that should be, I mean, we all know how much trouble American Soil got in, but like the message I seem to be getting from all over was that, you know, Mexican people were like, this doesn't ring true to me. You know what I mean? And so I feel like the onus is on the author. If you're going to write outside your experience, you better do it well, or the consequence is the public opinion is gonna, but you know, I think as artists, we got to take that risk, right?
But I agree.
So-
I think readers should be the ones that call you on it. I absolutely do think that. Not your peers, by the way. And I've seen, and that was peer pressure that forced her into that space. It wasn't reader pressure, it was peer pressure. And I don't think that's right.
So have you noticed over time the publishing industry, publishers being more cautious about what publishing books for fear of challenge either from the right or the left?
I have already. I'm just lucky I'm 2 books ahead. That's all I'll say. I mean, I'm already definitely feeling a difference. But what am I going to do? I've already, you know, handed in the books.
Right. And not only that, but librarians are thinking ahead about what books they're going to buy, what they feel comfortable buying for their libraries. And so there's another soft censorship issue right there. And teachers, when teachers are forced to categorize every single book in their school library, in their classroom libraries, and they have to like put them in by category, and like they have to take all this time to do that, they're just not going to have classroom libraries. And so this is going to be a wider and wider problem as people are afraid that, you know, the time involved of litigation. Like there have been librarians that have been sued over like the books in their libraries. And, you know, we're talking about books here. You know, it's like, really?
It does speak to the power of the physical book. You know, I always make the joke that these parents trying to ban books don't seem to be doing much about their kids' phones. Any internet search is far more terrifying than any book, but I think it says something to the permanence of a book that scares them even more. A book is a monolith. Every book is a monolith. And, you know, over the pandemic, I've did classroom visits on Zoom for over 100 schools. What's going to happen is that the schools are going to be separated. The schools that are adventurous and about teaching their kids about taking chances and risks and really treating their students as young adults. You're going to have those schools, and then you're going to have this huge swath of schools that are afraid, and their kids' education is going to suffer. And that's already happening, and I think it's going to get worse.
Especially in certain states. So it's like, you know, if an entire state makes something illegal to have in your classroom, I mean, then there's no independence. Teachers can't decide what to teach. They can't decide what's important for them in their, you know, their curriculums and stuff. It's like to have your lesson plans dictated by, you know, the governor of your state is kind of, that's why teachers are leaving, you know, and we need good teachers, and our kids need good public school education. We can't all give our kids private school education, and why would we want to if we can give them the right things in a public school, you know, setting? I mean, I find that horrific, the idea that maybe someday we won't have public schools.
I'd like to go back to the safety concerns. Senator Jonathan, you said you'd gotten some death threats, etc. How deep are the safety issues from these bullies and harassers? And actually, this is actually a question from one of our audience members. And how have you learned to manage? What have you done or wish you had done to protect yourself or your family from social media attacks, doxing, etc.?
Well, the first rule is never engage in any way, shape, or form, because what I've found is these people, their ire needs fresh wood to burn daily. So if you just don't answer, they will go away. It's always like some guy, it seems like with initials for the name, like DJ or CJ or JT, and they always have a little goatee and they're always sitting on like a quad and they're saying stuff like, I'll bet you do this to your daughters behind the bushes. If you ever set foot in Texas, I'll be waiting for you and stuff like that. So on the surface, I don't take them. It feels more like an invasion of privacy. I'm like, what are you going to ride your quad 2,000 miles? I'm not that scared in the sense, but then I just went silent on social media. I just set it to private for a while until things calm down. But if you don't engage them, that's what they want. That's what any troll wants, is to be engaged. They just want the negative attention of it. So do not answer. Don't try to reason. Just don't engage.
Cut off their oxygen. That's my new thing, is just, I did the same thing and it happens like you can just make a remark somewhere and, they'll come at you, and then just go private for a little bit and you just cut them off, and don't engage. I have to remind myself though, because I've got a big mouth. I want to fight. No, don't.
I'd guess there are some book banners on this chat right now listening to us, and that we might get attacked on social media, and we might get attacked by some on the left as well. So we're going to be proven right is what's going to happen. One way I avoid all this stuff, though, is I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter.
That's a whole mess. I have a profile, but I never go. I haven't looked at it in 2 years. I don't even know my password because it is scary out there.
It's a love-hate relationship for me, because I love that you can get news really fast on Twitter. That's why I like to go there. But it's like scary. So it's like, okay, duck in, duck out.
Now, I was going to say a practical question. Does having your books banned change your marketing strategies? And if so, how?
Well, it's the best PR imaginable. I would owe the fact that my book has been a bestseller for 15 years to all the publicity from the book banning. What you ban a book, you tell a kid they can't read something and they're going to read it. You tell an adult they can't read something and they're going to read it. And when, you get the alerts for your name, and dozens last week and this week because of Banned Books Week, of my name being mentioned over and over, and all of us who are getting banned, our names mentioned over and over. So we don't even have to do any publicity for this to happen.
Yeah, which is interesting, because I have not really, I felt like all my publishers were a little scared of it at first. Maybe they were trying to protect me, but I didn't get a lot of publicity support in the sense that, like, here, you want to make a statement and we'll send it out for you, or anything like that. I kind of felt like they were just a little sheepish about it. Like maybe they were just trying to protect me and they didn't want me to get doxxed or whatever. But people have just been coming to me. Like, I've been doing like 5 interviews a week. Sometimes it's just a high school student for a paper. Sometimes it's the Washington Post. Sometimes, it just almost every day there's something. And it's amazing publicity. I grew up in punk bands, so I'm kind of proud in a way, you know what I mean? This was the goal when I was 14 years old, screaming my lungs out in a little asbestos covered basement somewhere. But I'm almost embarrassed by the fact that so many people reach out to me and say, I'm so sorry for this nightmare you've been through. And I'm like, actually, dude, we've had like 5 printings in the last 4 months. And, I can pay my kids' tuition now or something, it's actually been a boon. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it's hard to sell books, and you tell them not to buy it, and human nature, they're going to go run out and buy it.
Well, it's the more PR you get when, a big newspaper article comes out, or like, I got to be on with Ali Velshi the other day, on his Banned Books Club thing. And I'm sure that was a huge push, but it's not how I want to sell books, if that makes sense to you. I want to sell books because I want readers to want to read them on their own. And so I'm not going to say I'm not going to, take any kind of extra push for sure, but that's not my goal at all. And the first time my book got banned, the first time Crank got banned, and Crank's been banned a lot. Like, it was the most banned book in 2010. And it was just, I like, why don't you like my book? I'm like, you don't like my book? What? Everybody has to like my book. This book is important. You have to love this book. So it hurt. And, you know, as you go on, of course, you develop a thick skin. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's frustrating to me that it's happening on this level, that it's become politicized, that it's not just concerned parents, that it's not concerned parents, that it's a political drive that's trying to, like, you know, take over school boards and take over state legislatures, and it's part of that is wrong.
So why do you think that is happening now? What do you think is energizing these efforts, these book bans and challenges?
Well, in Virginia, I just feel it was like Glenn Youngskin trying to just rile up his moribund conservative voting base by spinning the argument shrewdly from, you know, banned books into these woke socialist teachers are trying to indoctrinate your kids to be homosexual. I mean, and just they're just trying to win votes. And now I'm going to DC to talk to this guy on a panel. And I'm kind of excited about it because most of these panels we do are kind of an echo chamber in the sense that we're all obviously against book banning. But some of the people on this are people, and I'll just tell you right now, I'd be terrified to do this in Dallas or something, but it's in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown. So I feel like pretty safe. But like this guy, Tim Anderson, that wants to extend these book bans into the retail sector. And he wants to, you know, and I think it's important that we actually engage with the ones that do have to answer us. Trolls are not going to answer. They're just going to be trolls. But if we're talking about public officials, you know, I welcome the idea to open this dialogue with somebody that actually has to, at least on some level, be accountable for what they're saying. And the only way I can think to do it is to try to frame an argument whereby I'm sort of cross-examining this guy and he's just going to expose himself. You know what I mean? Rather than meet his like outrage with my outrage, just to calmly just deconstruct the argument and show it, make him expose it for what it is, which is just, you know, naked political posturing.
Right, it's dialogue. So it's that, you know, again, it comes back to being a dialogue instead of being like a, you know, a gang attack, you know. Those are important. And in fact, you know, if you can get to state legislatures and talk to them when that's the discussion, I think that's really important as well, or at least have a representative that represents you well in those places. It's really important.
I think the ferocity of these book bannings also is due in part to the fear and anger around COVID and masks and the government's role. So I think that goes hand in hand, that rage and the stolen election in heavy quotes. So the mythology that's built on the conservative side about what's been going on, I think book bannings fit right into that.
Now, Jonathan, you had talked about how you're going to be confronting one of these politicians, and I think that is awesome. And we've been asked a question: what are some concrete actions we authors can take to combat such hysterical censorship? So what are things that authors who may not have that opportunity can they do? Ellen, you were talking about going to school board meetings. Let's talk about that kind of stuff. What can authors do?
I mean, and even sometimes, even like in my school district, I don't see book bannings happening or going to happen, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be down there talking to them and letting them know how we feel about, you know, our teachers and our librarians and how important they are to us. Even if you come at it from that angle, not so much about anti-book banning, but like, we need school librarians and we need to support our teachers and we need to pay our teachers and we need to allow them the freedom to teach creatively, you know, and to teach truth, which that's a problem. So we need to come at it even in school districts that maybe aren't problematic, just because we need to create our own movement, our own forward progress, our own keep things moving in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, I feel terrible about, I read a story the other day. I don't know if it was in Idaho. I don't remember because it's everywhere now, but about a library director who finally, she was just she was so afraid of the bullying and the pressure and starting to fear for her safety that she resigned her job. So that poor lady is out of job now, you know what I mean? A livelihood, because a bunch of squeaky wheels that didn't even read any of the books that they're irate about just decided to, I mean, it's just bullying.
And
Yeah, Jimmy?
my answer is I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I mean, I live in Seattle. Although there was an effort to ban Brave New World at a high school here in Seattle a few years ago that I spoke against. So all we can do as authors is our voices, is speak against it and speak against it and continue to speak against it. Censorship in all forms. We need to remember that the freedom to read is the freedom to write. So we've got to support both things as authors.
I mean,
And something I know you've done a lot of, Sherman, and I do too, and I'm sure you do, Ellen, is just say yes. I mean, because I talk to a lot of people from like a high school teacher from San Diego County. He's like, hey, could you meet with us for a couple of Zoom things? I reached out to, and he lists 11 authors, and I'm the only one that said yes. You know what I mean? I'm like, what's wrong with the other 10 people? You know what I mean? So sometimes just saying yes, just being accessible means so much, I think. I mean,
supporting each other, it's like, if you see something happening to a peer or another author, it's okay to stand up and say, this is not right. I mean, we have strength in our own numbers. There's some strength to that as well. And we need to remember that we're not powerless, that our voices actually count for more because we have readers that listen to what we say. So using our platforms and not being afraid to use our platform if it seems right, if it seems fair, if it seems necessary. And again, I have a big mouth and I try not to engage, but if it's something about another author or a librarian or teacher, I do engage because I think I must.
That's a great point, Ellen, about our big voices and our platforms, and also with Jonathan, that I get a lot of requests and I say yes to as many as possible, especially during COVID. I've rededicated myself to speaking to high schools and to young people. So saying yes really helps. And
I'm glad we get to be out again because Zooms are fine, but like I'm going to my first book festival in a long time this weekend. I'm so excited to I'm not excited about getting on the plane so much. Three planes to get there. I'm like, oh my, please connections.
That is awesome, Ellen. I just wanted to give the Authors Guild a brief shout out in terms of what can some concrete actions authors can do. One thing is you can join your local school and library boards, and you can even write to them. And we actually have sample letters on our site that you can use. You can speak, as I love what you all are saying, is use your voices as authors. And these are things that you can do even if you don't have as large a platform as you three do, but you can certainly use your voice and speak out against these kinds of efforts.
That's a great idea, actually, because that's exactly what they're doing, is mobilizing all their trolls that haven't read our work to just go out and publicly smear it. If we have an organized effort of, a sort of a protocol, letters, let's send letters in massive support. Then when the squeaky wheels come, there's like, hey, well, that's great. Well, I got a stack of letters this thick that say the opposite of you. Hey, guess what? It's a democracy. So see ya. I mean, we have to use our numbers in a way that is actually effective. Like I said earlier when we started, that these people are so good at sort of insinuating themselves into these positions just by being loud and bullying. But at the end of the day, I mean, it should be a numbers game. But the left has always kind of had problems with this. No, the right always comes out, scratching and clawing like a scared animal because they're outnumbered and losing the cultural wars. And then the left is sort of passively, often is maybe kind of too passive in our approach. I mean, we should be, I'm glad you said that. I hadn't really framed it that way. We need to use our numbers in an effective way.
I have a concrete idea that came to me.
Yay.
Yes, I helped initiate the Independent Booksellers Day. The day after, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, where authors went into bookstores to be guest booksellers. So I think the Authors Guild should start a similar thing in bookstores, to where authors come in to support banned books.
Oh.
If you get local authors flooding bookstores, you're going to have all sorts of people showing up.
Thank you for that, Sherman. That is indeed a very interesting idea. So we have another question, but somebody's asked, I would like to hear your thoughts about what this trend means to our world. This has massive tragic consequences to our civilization. This is book burning. I would like to hear your thoughts about this. You are our writers, our spokespeople. You ring the alarms for our world. What does this book burning mean and do to our world?
It makes it less intellectually curious. And that's because if our kids are not getting books, if our kids are not exposed to things, it's closing those doors and windows that we spend all this time opening. And that's really, and I always, one of my favorite things was to say about librarians is that they are not gatekeepers, they're gate openers. But now the gates are being shut again. So that is a real concern that we need to make sure that our kids get a hold of books one way or another. We really do. I don't want to see our world close up.
This is a direct attack on the young people that probably need the advocacy and representation more than anybody else in the nation. You know what I mean? Young people, non-binary people, people of color, people that are already lacking representation in our democracy, who don't have that piece of the American dream, to whom, even just growing up without a lot of money, I saw the difference in how people were taught. Like I had upper middle class friends, and I was taught that the world was made of meat and always expect the worst. And these kids were taught, destiny is a ladder and you just climb it, and so you start to look at the inequity and just how people are taught about opportunity and so the best way to keep these people marginalized is to not let them tell their stories. That's why they don't want these books, because every book we've talked about here has got an LGBTQ IA plus character or a protagonist of color. I mean, it's no coincidence here. I mean, 9, I think, what is it, 8 or 9 of the 10 books on that ALA list year were either LGBTQ or people of color as a protagonist. And so the way to make sure these people don't get representation is don't let their stories be told. Don't let them go to the library and feel like Mike did, like, where's the books about me? Don't let them read things that tell them they have a place in this democracy, in this culture, and that they're not alone, and that that's why they want to do it. And it's scary.
Book banning is, throughout human history, has been the first step of an authoritarian government from the far left to the far right. This is not a minor issue. This is authoritarian thinking. These are people with authoritarian ambitions. And I've seen it mostly on the right, but I've also seen it in some degree on the left. And we have to stop it. We have to speak out against it. We can't let it happen, because this is just the first step, and there's more steps they'll try to take.
And they're pretty dang organized. That's what's unnerving, I mean, when this first broke, I'm like, this is going to pass over. People are going to see this lady on TikTok for what she is, and it's how unreasonable she's being and how nonsensical her argument is. But it's just gaining steam because they're organized and they're just determined to, they can't be bothered to read an actual book, but God, they can, they'll beat the street, and, they'll spend hours with trolling you.
I would like to end with a question about hope. Are there signs of hope that you see out there on the horizon? For example, there was a high school student who beat out a 47-year-old right-winger for a school board. What hope do you see out there?
The hope all lies with the younger generation. I mean, my generation's all, I shouldn't say fortunately, they're checking out. The younger generations are, I mean, you look at the Parkland kids, you look at Greta, you look at these kids that are like into climate change stuff, and they're into like, they want a future. They want the planet to exist, for their kids and their kids' kids. And so that's where the hope lies. And that's also why it's so important that we keep providing books, keep writing them, keep providing books for them, so that they feel the hope. Because once they have the hope, that's where all hope lies, is with them.
I think it's helpful we're even having the dialogue. I mean, I guess I'm trying to put an optimistic spin on the fact that we even have to have this cultural conversation, but it does give us a chance to, I think as Americans, we tend to take certain liberties and freedoms for granted. And I mean, in some ways, sometimes I feel like so many of the ideals this country was built on turned out to be just, bleh, you know what I mean? We got manifest destiny, slavery. I mean, so many of our institutions are failed. We have this, I always come back to this idea of pluralism, which I find hopeful. But the other thing is that we can have this public conversation, and we should. I just feel like we've gotten lazy in a way. And I think maybe I'm kind of hopeful that people are getting more engaged politically, and because it's just not going to happen by itself, you know.
Hope, you know, you look at that top 10 list, that top 20 list of banned books, and you're talking about millions and millions of sales.
Yeah, okay.
Millions. And kids are finding the books. I get the emails and letters all the time. Kids are finding the books they need, whether it's mine or somebody else's. They find the books they need. So I have hope in those ambitious readers.
Well, thank you all very much for taking part in this. We think this has been great, a great way to kick off Banned Books Week. And for all of our viewers and for our panelists as well, please support other events during Banned Books Week. There'll be a lot of other webinars and panels that you can take advantage of and learn more about this situation and get more ideas on what you can do to help. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.